So there are two types of music edits in this world, good ones and bad ones. A good music edit might sound like this. And a bad one might sound like this. That obviously doesn't work, since you can clearly hear where the editor made a cut to the music. And simply adding a long crossfade like this doesn't solve the problem. In fact, it creates a new problem, the muddy edit. These are of course extreme examples, but the point is that music has a flow to it just like your edit does. And when you decide to chop up a piece of music, you have to be very specific about how you're going to put it back together. Hey, I'm Chris, lead trainer at Film Editing Pro. There's a famous quote that goes something like, aside from storytelling itself, music editing is the #1 most powerful skill any editor can master. It will dramatically improve every single project you ever touch. Well, it's probably not famous, and it's kind of a quote from me, but it's true. Music is incredibly important. And as we edit it to fit our cuts, we have to be careful not to let our edits interfere with the emotion that the music is helping to build. That means our edits, of which there are often many, need to be very, very invisible. So let's look at 3 pretty major mistakes to avoid when cutting your music, and you can use these techniques in any editing software. The first and most obvious thing you might do incorrectly when joining music is to place the edit on the wrong beat. Let's look at this example using the same cue that we heard earlier in the lesson. So as you can see, this cue has a very predictable up-down rhythm, which we've marked in red and green. The red markers are downbeats and the green markers are upbeats. So it goes like this: down, up, down, up, down, up, and so on. Let's say you're trying to remove around 3 seconds or so from the cue. That's going to be about 3 full measures, which ends up totaling about 3 seconds and 9 frames to be exact. So we'll cut out this part, and we're left with this. Let's see how it sounds. Alright, obviously that sounds off. We've cut exactly on a beat, as in the timing is exactly right, but it's just the wrong beat. We've interrupted a cadence established in the cue, which in this case is the down, up pattern. Now we've got down, up, down, which obviously sounds wrong. Instead, you'll want to remove only 1 full measure, consisting of a downbeat and upbeat pair. Let's play it. Okay, this works well. It's a pretty seamless edit. If we still need to remove that extra second or so to make our cut work, we'd need to test other areas of the cue to modify, and maybe get a bit creative. For example, if the down, up rhythm is giving us trouble every time we interrupt it, let's create an entirely new rhythm in this section. We'll use a few of the red downbeats to create a descending chord progression, removing all the green upbeats in between. First, we'll remove this 1 second of upbeat. Then we'll remove these 3 seconds of beats here. What we're left with is a cadence that goes down, up, followed by down, 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 with chords descending down the scale each time. Have a listen. Nice, that works really well. We've creatively modified the rhythm of the song to allow us to remove 4 seconds of time from the cue, along with giving it a completely different feel in this section. And of course, you could add a bit of flourish as the beats reach the bottom of their descent by adding a cymbal swell and a subtle drum roll. This example is meant to illustrate the creative possibilities available to you when recutting a piece of music. You never need to feel constrained to what the original song is doing. You can usually recompose it as needed to work within your cut. Eventually, as you begin to listen to more music with a creative and open mind, you'll begin to recognize patterns that you can manipulate, and you'll become a more skilled music editor as a result. Alright, let's keep going. The next problem you might encounter is cutting off beat. If you've got something that sounds like this, and you're hearing a little bit of echo in it, it's because you've chosen the right beat to place your edit on, but your cut is actually just off by a frame or two. It's a little inaccurate. Fortunately, this one's easy to fix. You can begin by looking at your B-side clip. That's the one on the right. I'm going to move it down by one track on the timeline. I'm going to then extend the left trim forward in time beneath the A-side clip. By zooming in closely on the timeline, you can begin to see patterns in the waveforms. If you examine closely around the edit point, you might see that your B-side clip is only off by just 1 or 2 frames. You can take the clip and slide it around until the waveforms match up perfectly. Then, make a cut on your B-side clip and move it back up to the A-side clip and join everything back together. Have a listen. That sounds much better. And if you need to add a little 1 or 2 frame crossfade, you can. Though many times if your cut is accurate, you really won't need it. In this case, it sounds pretty much the same with and without the fade. Alright, now for our third and final problem when placing music edits: cutting between dissimilar sections of the cue. Many cues change as they progress, whether they vary in tempo or introduce additional layers of instrumentation. Take this cue for example, Thoughtful Minds from Position Music. It starts off with sparse instrumentation and plucked strings here at the beginning. And by the end, it's become a much fuller cue, with a percussion track, sweeping strings, piano, and probably a few other things that are a little bit trickier to pick out. So let's say, for our particular cut, we needed the music to build for only around 8 seconds, until around here. And by this point, we'd want the crescendo to have quickly built the music to as big as it was around the 54-second mark. So if we cut everything out between those two sections, we're going to ultimately shrink the cue from being 1 minute and 17 seconds down to only 31 seconds. So if that were our goal, to get the music to fit into this time frame with the builds landing at these moments, we're done, right? Not really. Why? Because it sounds really bad. Have a listen. Yeah, that's weird. It gets way too big instantly and feels like an obvious edit. Not a very natural manipulation to the cue. Problems like this will most often occur when you cut between an early part of the cue into a much later part of the cue. Now, to be totally clear, our cut is on beat, and its timing and frame accuracy is fine. It's just cutting between two very different feeling parts of the music. So let's fix it. The solution to this is to take the B-side track and bring it down to the next audio layer. Now, trim out the left side of the music a bit. We're going to want to layer some of the B-side track under the A-side track. And let's add a long fade to bring in this additional B-side track. This way, we can start to slowly introduce that additional instrumentation before we make the cut. This crossfade is a linear fade, which we have set to constant or equal power in our editing program. Okay, let's have a listen. Alright, so that's getting there, but it's not quite working yet. The B-side later section of the track starts to fade in too quickly. We hear its instrumentation with louder strings and beats coming on very quickly, obscuring the first part of the cue a bit too much. See what I mean? In this scenario, with an exponential fade, the music from the B-side will come on much more gradually, then ramp up to the point where it completely takes over. If your software had an exponential crossfade, you could just swap out your linear fade for an exponential one here and you're done. Since we're using Avid, which doesn't offer this feature, we'll just create the basic shape of an exponential fade manually with keyframes. Okay, let's have a listen. Nice, that's much better. Now we've got a believable and smooth transition from a very early part of this cue into a much later part, building the fullness of the music much more quickly and fitting within our hypothetical time constraints. Keep in mind, this type of layer only works if the beats of both sides of the cues line up perfectly. Otherwise, you'll end up with a stuttery, muddy mess. In other scenarios, if your music track had alternate mixes or stems, you could use those various layers of instrumentation to help with your transitions between sections of cues. Alright, so we just looked at 3 common problems you might run into when placing your music edits, and some techniques for fixing them. Well, hopefully those tips were helpful. If you're still new to editing, eventually these best practices for cutting your music are going to become second nature, and you'll forget that there was ever a time that you might make such a rookie mistake. If you want to learn more about music editing, we've got a full course over at our website, filmeditingpro.com. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Hey there! For tons more free editing training, head over to our website at filmeditingpro.com/free training. Here you can download free editing guides along with high-quality video training courses created by our team of professional Hollywood editors. Our tutorials cover a wide range of editing topics, like cutting awesome movie trailers, editing action scenes, how to work with music and sound design, and a lot more. All of these free guides and videos are available at filmeditingpro.com/free training. I'll see you next time.